Scene 2 of Lesbian Hitchhiker 2 presents a rich tableau for examining the dynamics of adult lesbian intimacy, mentorship, and mutual recognition within the context of queer women's lived experiences, and it provides a compelling narrative that prioritizes emotional depth and interiority over sensationalized drama or surface-level tension. The scene opens with Jody welcoming Sinn into her space with warmth, humor, and a sense of relief that help has arrived just in time, immediately establishing a tone of care and attentiveness that frames the interaction as one of inclusion and respect. From the outset, the dialogue conveys both practical concern Jody had intended to hire strong helpers, and an acknowledgement of the unexpected qualities that Sinn and her companion bring, allowing the audience to perceive the characters' layered personalities beyond superficial assumptions. The exchange of playful banter underscores the gentle testing of boundaries between adults, illustrating how queer women may navigate attraction, curiosity, and cautious approach in a social world that often scrutinizes or misunderstands same-gender desire. Sinn's and Jody's interaction highlights a delicate negotiation between professional responsibilities and personal intuition, as Jody evaluates how to integrate newcomers into her existing life while also attending to her own emotional responses. This dynamic is particularly resonant for lesbian audiences because it reflects real-life scenarios in which queer women must assess trust, safety, and compatibility without relying on conventional heteronormative scripts, foregrounding the ethical dimensions of adult connection and intimacy. The dialogue reveals subtle tension around assumptions, desire, and social propriety, as Jody notes her unease at picking up strangers on the side of the road while also acknowledging Sinn's vitality and capability, exemplifying the balance queer women often navigate between emotional openness and pragmatic caution. The scene also emphasizes the character's capacity for observation and reading nonverbal cues, demonstrating the ways that queer women cultivate emotional literacy to recognize vulnerability, enthusiasm, and sincerity in others, a skill often honed in response to societal erasure of lesbian desire. As the conversation unfolds, the characters explore questions of identity and storytelling, with Sinn and her companion providing a surface-level explanation of being college students traveling for exploration. This narrative device serves a dual function. It illustrates how queer women, like all women, sometimes mask their full histories to maintain social safety, and it also sets up a relational intimacy predicated on gradual disclosure and mutual trust. Jody's skepticism, tempered by humor and affection, provides a space for Sinn to navigate authenticity and performativity in a supportive, non-coercive environment, emphasizing that emotional intimacy can develop through negotiation, dialogue, and the careful calibration of boundaries rather than through immediate physical or sexual engagement. The scene's repeated references to tasks, such as helping with the club and preparing a stage, function metaphorically to explore collaboration and shared purpose as a vehicle for emotional connection, suggesting that queer intimacy often emerges not only through overt expressions of desire but also through the rhythms of work, shared responsibilities, and the co-construction of experiences that honor each individual's agency. The discussion about putting together a show and performing, alongside moments of lighthearted teasing, illustrates the playful, performative aspect of queer relational life, emphasizing that joy, laughter, and creative expression are integral to sustaining adult lesbian relationships, particularly in contexts that might otherwise feel isolating or surveilled. The attention paid to how each character perceives and responds to the other's presence, how Sinn's demeanor impacts Jody and vice versa, underscores the ways that queer women may experience a heightened sensitivity to relational cues, reflective of broader social conditions in which their desires are marginalized or misread. Furthermore, the dialogue surrounding performance, competence, and play reveals an intricate layering of admiration, subtle challenge, and acknowledgement, demonstrating that queer mentorship, emotional scaffolding, and recognition often coexist within relationships that also carry elements of desire or longing. These interactions, while playful and adult in nature, resonate with universal human experiences of being seen, validated, and invited to participate in a world that may otherwise overlook one's capabilities or presence, highlighting how lesbian-centered narratives can illuminate the ethical and emotional richness of female friendships and partnerships. The scene's careful pacing allows viewers to appreciate how attraction and admiration may coexist with caution and deliberation, reinforcing that emotional intimacy is not a binary experience but a spectrum in which recognition, respect, and desire interweave to form meaningful connection. Notably, the dialogue includes moments of Jody expressing internal emotional impact in response to Sinn's actions on stage, signaling that adult queer relationships are often shaped by observation and emotional resonance rather than immediate physical engagement, and that intensity of feeling can emerge in nuanced, reflective ways. This emphasis on interiority and emotional reactivity reflects a central concern of the film, portraying lesbian relationships as ethically grounded, emotionally sophisticated, and socially contextualized, rather than relying on spectacle or transgression for narrative momentum. Sinn's capacity to engage with humor, to respond to Jody's observations, and to maintain her agency within the emerging bond reinforces the film's commitment to portraying queer women as active participants in defining the terms of their own emotional lives, resisting external pressures that might otherwise dictate their comportment or visibility. The scene further emphasizes the negotiation of trust, as both characters must navigate assumptions about identity, safety, and propriety, while simultaneously allowing space for connection and potential affection. This reflects the broader, societal pressures that queer women often encounter, where expressions of intimacy are frequently policed, minimized, or sensationalized, necessitating a careful choreography of behavior that balances authenticity with prudence. The character's dialogue also highlights intergenerational and relational mentorship, as Jody, more established in her life, observes, evaluates, and guides Sinn's engagement with the new environment, while Sinn demonstrates resilience, adaptability, and intelligence, challenging stereotypical notions of youthfulness or inexperience. Through these exchanges, the film foregrounds the ways that lesbian and queer women may develop networks of support, guidance, and mutual acknowledgement that are emotionally sustaining and ethically meaningful, providing alternatives to heteronormative frameworks of mentorship or partnership. The depiction of shared tasks, such as preparing the club and setting up the stage, serves as a narrative device to explore relational labor, cooperation, and mutual recognition, emphasizing that queer relationships often flourish in spaces where collaboration is both practical and symbolic, creating a scaffolding for trust, intimacy, and shared accomplishment. The scene is careful to frame the emotional dynamics in a context that is recognizably adult, focusing on interiority, reflection, and ethical awareness, allowing viewers to appreciate the emotional and relational subtleties without relying on sensational or sexualized imagery. This approach is particularly resonant for lesbian and broader LGBTQ+ audiences, as it foregrounds the complexity, negotiation, and legitimacy of adult same-gender relationships, illustrating that intimacy is multidimensional and not reducible to physical acts. Moreover, the scene interrogates societal discomfort with adult expressions of lesbian desire, presenting a narrative that insists on seriousness, nuance, and respect, while avoiding the erasure or sensationalization that is often characteristic of mainstream media depictions. By presenting characters who are fully realized, ethically minded, and emotionally responsive, the film challenges cultural tendencies to simplify, stereotype, or eroticize lesbian relationships, insisting instead that queer women's interior lives, decision-making, and capacity for care and admiration are central to the narrative. The dialogue repeatedly emphasizes emotional responsiveness, reflection, and acknowledgement of impact, revealing that desire, admiration, and connection can manifest in ways that are intellectually and emotionally profound, rather than solely physical, and that queer relational ethics involve ongoing attention to the other's well-being, boundaries, and emotional state. The scene's layered portrayal of playfulness, attraction, and mutual assessment reflects real-world dynamics in which queer women negotiate emotional authenticity with social and professional legibility, demonstrating how mentorship, admiration, and ethical care can coexist with desire, creating a multifaceted understanding of relational intimacy. In particular, the way Jody observes Sinn's performances, comments on her effect, and invites her into practical tasks underscores the interplay between recognition, emotional impact, and relational agency, highlighting the nuanced negotiation required in adult queer interactions. The tension between surface-level explanations of identity and deeper truths about experience and desire further illuminates the ethical and emotional labor inherent in lesbian relationships, revealing the ongoing process of trust-building, boundary setting, and the negotiation of personal visibility. Throughout the scene, the characters navigate humor, curiosity, and observation, demonstrating that emotional attunement and mutual recognition are critical components of queer relational dynamics, and that these skills are cultivated in response to social environments that may otherwise invalidate or misread expressions of same-gender intimacy. This emphasis on observation, responsiveness, and ethical reflection reinforces the film's thematic focus on emotional truth, self-recognition, and the quiet resilience of women-centered relationships, offering audiences a model of lesbian intimacy that is grounded in ethical awareness, mutual acknowledgement, and sustained emotional investment. The scene also portrays adult queer desire as intertwined with admiration, playful engagement, and the gradual unfolding of understanding, illustrating that attraction is multifaceted and can be expressed through attention, shared experiences, and reflection rather than relying on overt sexualized acts, thus challenging mainstream cultural scripts that frequently distort or sensationalize lesbian desire. Moreover, the interaction foregrounds the importance of communication, negotiation, and responsive care, showing that the cultivation of intimacy involves constant attention to the other's perspective, the balancing of ethical considerations, and a recognition of relational history and context. The narrative underscores the significance of both emotional and relational labor, depicting how queer women actively construct and sustain connections that honor personal boundaries, while fostering trust, admiration, and shared engagement. Sinn's responsiveness to Jody's guidance, observations, and gentle challenges illustrates the dynamic interplay of mentorship and mutual recognition, demonstrating that queer relationships often involve reciprocal learning, support, and validation, as well as the careful calibration of social and emotional risk. Through these narrative choices, the scene affirms the legitimacy of adult lesbian desire and connection, portraying it as ethically grounded, emotionally nuanced, and socially intelligible, and in doing so contributes to broader cultural conversations about visibility, respect, and recognition of women-centered relationships. The film's careful attention to dialogue, interiority, and relational ethics positions it as a meaningful exploration of queer emotional life, emphasizing the significance of negotiation, observation, and responsive care in adult relationships, while resisting simplistic portrayals or sensationalized tropes. The careful interplay of humor, reflection, and attentiveness in this scene demonstrates that emotional intimacy among queer women is a deeply complex, ethically rich, and socially situated practice, and that recognition, admiration, and the cultivation of shared experiences are central to sustaining relational depth. The scene further illustrates the ways in which adult lesbian relationships are formed and maintained in the face of social pressures, highlighting both the constraints imposed by external judgment and the strategies that women use to navigate these constraints while preserving authenticity, care, and connection. Sinn's integration into the space, her engagement with tasks, and her responsiveness to Jody's observations illustrate the negotiation of belonging, competence, and trust that is characteristic of adult queer relational life, and which resonates with audiences seeking authentic representation. Additionally, the narrative emphasizes that queer women's emotional experiences are not confined to romantic or erotic spheres, but encompass mentorship, ethical care, emotional attunement, and shared creative engagement, demonstrating a holistic approach to intimacy. By portraying the characters as fully realized adults, navigating complex emotions and social expectations with attentiveness and reflection, the scene situates lesbian desire and relational connection within a framework of ethical, emotional, and practical intelligence, affirming that adult queer intimacy is socially meaningful, emotionally rich, and ethically considered. The interplay of admiration, observation, trust, and gentle challenge within this scene provides a nuanced representation of how adult women may cultivate deep relational bonds while negotiating power, social legibility, and personal vulnerability, offering a model for understanding the ethical and emotional dimensions of queer connection. Furthermore, the narrative emphasizes that emotional responsiveness, recognition, and attunement are central to sustaining adult lesbian relationships, and that these qualities are cultivated through experience, reflection, and ethical engagement rather than assumed or imposed. In sum, Scene 2 offers a complex, layered, and emotionally resonant portrayal of adult lesbian relational life, foregrounding the development of trust, admiration, mutual recognition, and ethical care as central to understanding desire, intimacy, and personal visibility within the context of social structures that may not fully support or understand same-gender love. By prioritizing interiority, relational ethics, and emotional nuance, the scene provides a rich exploration of how adult queer women navigate attraction, mentorship, and shared purpose while maintaining respect for personal boundaries, social propriety, and ethical relational practice, contributing meaningfully to cultural conversations about the visibility, resilience, and depth of women-centered relationships, and affirming the validity and complexity of adult lesbian emotional life in ways that are both safe, nuanced, and deeply resonant, with audiences seeking authentic, ethically grounded, and emotionally reflective representation of queer experience, offering viewers insight into the ways intimacy, admiration, trust, and connection unfold in adult lesbian interactions, highlighting how relational negotiation, boundary setting, and ethical care are intertwined with the formation of meaningful bonds and the recognition of emotional impact, ultimately presenting a thoughtful, serious, and socially grounded model of queer relational life, one that challenges simplistic or sensationalized portrayals, celebrates emotional intelligence and interiority, and affirms the ongoing process of becoming visible, understood, and ethically connected within a world that continues to struggle with fully acknowledging women's love for women, and that models for audiences how admiration, trust, mentorship, play, and ethical engagement can coalesce into a robust and socially intelligible framework for adult lesbian connection and relational authenticity, demonstrating the film's commitment to presenting queer women as fully realized, emotionally sophisticated, and ethically considered individuals whose interior lives, emotional responses, and relational strategies provide both representation and resonance for audiences invested in understanding the depth and complexity of women-centered lesbian relational experience.